this is a buck of a lifetime, especially on a general season unit. I remember looking at it and talking to my wife after I got off the phone with him. I remember just sitting there staring at this photo on my phone and just like looking at it and thinking, man, this is incredible. I've got a tag and I know that this buck is in my unit. I remember telling my wife, like, this fall's probably going to be a little bit rough because I'm going to move in with this buck. I just need to understand like the breadth of this opportunity because I'll just never get to hunt a buck like this again, you know?
Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and we have a great one for you today. Today, we're actually connected with someone that I've wanted to get on the podcast for a while. He works for GoHunt. If you aren't familiar with GoHunt, get on there, check out your draw odds, check out all that cool stuff. There's going to be a link for everything in the show notes, but today, we're talking with Trail Kreitzer. Trail is just a good old boy. You know, he's small town Utah, just wanted to hunt his whole life and managed to find a career in it. And he has some amazing stories for us today. I have a feeling we'll have him back on here in the future. So first, I want to say thank you to Trail for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it, man. To you listeners, hope you guys enjoy this episode. At the end, if you do, please give us a like, a follow, and a review, all those things. Also, please pay attention. Follow us on Instagram and YouTube. We are doing a big giveaway here in a few months, and I don't want you guys to miss it, and that's the place where most of the details will be. But for now, guys, let's kick this thing off and let Trail tell you some of his stories. All right, Trail, welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, brother. How are you, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite.
I'm
doing good.
Super excited to have you here, man. I've been following you forever. In fact, I think one time you came to Colorado for the I think it was the ban on mountain lion hunting. You were out there, and I saw you, and I couldn't get the courage to come say hello. So I'm glad you followed me on Instagram, and I was like, oh, I got to jump on this opportunity finally here.
Yeah,
but I'm glad we're able to connect, man, because I think what you're doing is pretty cool.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, we Brady and I came out to do the rally at the Capitol, and we just thought it was important to kind of support mountain lion hunting, support conservation, and then I just have I don't have dogs, and I've never ran dogs. I've hunted with some buddies that have dogs, and it's their way of life. And I have a friend that's probably a third or fourth generation houndsman, and I feel like a real soft spot for houndsmen and what they do and the amount of effort and work that they put into their craft. And I just wanted to support those guys. I want to see, houndsmen still have the opportunity to hunt and to live that lifestyle, if you will. When I worked at the Division of Wildlife, there was a guy there that I knew. His name was Clint Meekum, and he since passed, but he did a bunch of the lion studies for Game and Fish, and Utah State worked with them. And he told me, if you ever draw a lion tag, I'd love to take you. He's like, I don't have the time to go out and find a track and all that. But he's like, if you're out on the weekends and you're looking for a track, if you turn one up, I'll come and help you out. And so I ended up going out every weekend and ended up cutting a big tom track. And I called him up and he came and met me. And those guys hunt from mules. So they just unload mules. And most of the time when they're out hunting, they just unload mules and dogs and they just go for a ride and they're just cutting country and trying to see what the dogs can pick up. But that was probably one of the most fascinating, like really, truly interesting days that I've spent in the woods, to be honest, with a guy that has like lived his entire life, chasing lions and also just hunting in general. That guy was just a wealth of knowledge. And so, yeah, I just have an affinity or a soft spot or something for houndsmen, even though I don't do it. I don't think I ever will, but I just want to see those guys' way of life protected. And I just wanted to show up and be at that rally. So
that's awesome, man. That's awesome. And we appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. I've had a few houndsmen on the podcast. They always have some crazy stories.
For sure.
It's a way of life. Like they're like, yeah, you guys go ahead and do your big game stuff. Well, I'll do that if I can, but I'm gonna worry about my dogs. And so it's like it's a whole separate genre of hunting that is super unique. And I've been invited to like ride along, but I know you have to like earn the actual hunt with one of those guys. So I just want to go out there and just like see what the whole thing is like, because I haven't had that opportunity yet, but it is super cool.
You should do it. It's awesome. It's so.
Yeah, I was planning on this winter, and then I went and had a baby with my wife, and so I wasn't able to do very much hunting this year at all. So, but that's my problem.
That'll get you.
But let's do this, Trail. In case there's people that are listening that don't know who you are already, man, maybe a quick introduction, how long you've been hunting, and whatever else you think is pertinent that the people might want to know about you.
Yeah, so I grew up in southern Utah. I still live here. I grew up in this little tiny town called Antimony. I live in Cedar City now, and I've been here about 16 years. Got a wife and 3 boys. So my oldest is 20. I got a 16-year-old and then a 13-year-old. Um, Grew up hunting and fishing. So my mom and dad are originally from Indiana. They moved out west because my dad really wanted the opportunity to be in the West. He just loved the mountains and loved the outdoors. And so they
That's awesome.
pulled up shop and moved to Utah. And, we grew up across the street from a state park. So my dad was the park manager. And I had a big reservoirs, Otter Creek State Park. And, I just grew up, my closest neighbor was a mile. I went to a small 2-room schoolhouse, had 1 kid in my class, just real remote.
Yeah.
My closest neighbor was a mile, but I spent a lot of time just roaming around in the backyard, down by the river, and my brothers trapped muskrats, and we jackrabbit hunted I think back on holidays. So we just had, Thanksgiving and Christmas, although it's a few months past, but every Thanksgiving morning we would always get up and go jackrabbit hunting, and we would line out and we would go out and hunt all day. And that was kind of the thing that we did. And I missed that, but, yeah, just a remote upbringing. And then, as I got older, I thought I wanted to be a dentist for some reason. And,
Okay.
yeah,
That's a hard left from the lifestyle, but all right.
hard left. Yeah. I just thought, they make decent money, but it didn't take me too long, into, young adulthood where I was like, I just can't do that every day. I can't look in people's mouths all day and work in an office. So, switched it up and decided I would go into wildlife science. So I graduated with a degree from Utah State in wildlife biology. And then I went to work for the state of Utah. So I was a habitat biologist for a number of years. And then ultimately I just loved to hunt. So I was saving all my, comp time, any vacation time, sick leave, to go hunting. And then in the meantime, I was doing a little bit of freelance writing for GoHunt. When GoHunt kicked off. So I was writing like unit profiles and some application strategy articles and that kind of thing. And so they had a position that kind of opened up that they thought I would be a good fit for. So they reached out and offered the job, and I made the switch over there. And I've been there for about 11 years, I want to say. So I worked at GoHunt. I started out mostly just like research and writing and kind of procuring gear for the gear shop once that kicked off. And it's kind of morphed into now where I do probably maybe 50% writing. So I write a lot of the application strategy articles for our platform. And then I do a lot of content. So we have a couple podcasts, the Big Hunt Guys podcast. I have my own podcast, which is the Game Trail. And then I do video content for them. And that's it. That's kind of who I am in a nutshell. I got long-winded. Sorry.
No, that's all right. That probably keeps you plenty busy. That's funny from a dentist to just like, I wouldn't exactly call you an influencer, but you toe that line to a hunting influencer, man. That's a crazy journey.
Yeah, you'd have never thought, if you'd have known me in high school, like you'd have never thought I'd end up at a mic, or in front of a camera. Just, I'm pretty introverted by nature. It's kind of a stretch for me to do this kind of thing, but yeah, I never ever would have thought. But that's
funny. Yeah, well, if you're talking about something you love, it gets pretty easy, even for the biggest introvert to just, spill their guts and talk all day. I've had plenty of people on this podcast. They're like, man, I don't know. Or they actually, we're going back and forth beforehand. They're like, I don't know. I'm not a storyteller. I don't know if I've never been on a podcast. They get on, and they're some of our best episodes. They just they're so passionate about just what their story was and wanting to tell all the details that like they just lose that whatever it is that keeps them nervous. And they tell some amazing stories. And that's what's cool about, I guess, this format of podcasting, long form hunting stories. I wish we were sitting around a campfire right now, Trail, because I think that's the only thing that could make this better.
Yeah, absolutely. I had Dave Brinker on my podcast recently, and that was a comment that he made. He's like, if you went back 50, 60 years, this would be a conversation we'd just be having around a campfire. But, current day and age, this is kind of the way we do it. And I think it's important. I think it's good. I know that I listen to quite a bit of content, and those are always some of my favorite, just some storytelling. So yeah,
absolutely.
I agree.
I don't know if you can tell my light behind me. It was my attempt to put a campfire sort of in the scene, just a flickering red and orange.
Some ambiance.
The least I could do. But okay, we're here for a reason. We're here to hear some of your favorite hunting stories, man. So why don't you set the stage, and I'll do my best not to interrupt and ask the questions when I'm completely lost because I'm a newer hunter.
Yeah. As I was thinking about it, so I guess maybe I don't know how much time you got, and I get long-winded, like I said, but I think as I was thinking about it, some of the most meaningful stories to me are hunts where I felt like I really had to stretch myself. I had to work really hard, and I've been pretty vocal in the content that I've done, whether it's our podcast or video content. To me, some of the most fulfilling, like the most satisfaction that I get in hunting is from kind of matching wits with an animal and really having to grind it out and work really hard for it, and not knowing the outcome. And then when it does eventually come together, there's nothing quite as satisfying as like that moment where you just poured your heart and soul into it and you just absolutely worked your tail off, and then it came together. And I've got some too that didn't come together, that I didn't end up with an animal and a harvest. And I actually, when I look back on those, I really cherish those some as well. But I guess I would go back to a mule deer hunt, which I'm primarily probably known as an elk guy, and I love archery elk hunting. It's become my very favorite hunt every year. I just love the interaction, the dynamic, and the time of year. But I do love mule deer hunting, and it's just a different type of hunt. It's just such a mental grind. In comparison to archery elk, I feel like you can cover country. It's a lot more active, and you get to bugle and cow call, and you get all that diverse interaction with an elk, where you don't necessarily get that with a mule deer. So it's just so much more mental, I feel like. So I'll go back. I think it was 2013, and I had a general season deer tag in Utah, and I'd been out in the summer scouting. The time I didn't have a ton of extra time to like get out and scout, but every weekend that I did, I was getting out and trying to, do as good as I could to find a big buck. And I remember I had a buddy. His name's Ryan Dastrip. So Ryan, shout out Ryan if you're listening. But he works for the Forest Service, but he's a good dude. But he had an archery elk tag in the same unit, and I just kind of relayed information back and forth. I'd had an archery elk tag in the unit prior, and so we were kind of sharing information. And he called me one night. I still remember like vividly. I remember it's stupid the things you remember, but I still had like my DWR work uniform on. I remember the shirt, the pants, the brown Carhartt, the whole thing. And I was in the kitchen, and we were kind of getting ready for dinner. I remember with my wife, she was cooking, and I think she was doing tacos if I remember. But I was kind of standing up against the counter, and I saw he called, and I thought, well, I better answer, because usually when I talk to Ryan, we've got some good intel to share. And it was probably like early July. And I pick up the phone, and we're chit chatting, and he's like, dude, I just saw a buck tonight that he's like, I just can't believe. He's like, he's not completely grown out, but he's like, he's probably going to be like 35 plus wide. He's like, he's got these big cheaters. They're coming off both sides. He's like, he's kind of a mainframe 3-point with a bunch of junk. He's got like a floating main beam, and he's got a lot going on. And I was like, okay, cool. And I was like, did you get any video or anything? And he's like, yeah. So he sends me a photo, and it's just a digiscope photo, and it's pretty blurry because he's a long ways away. But from the frame, I looked at it, and I was just like, this is a buck of a lifetime, especially on a general season unit, right?
Yeah.
And I remember looking at it and talking to my wife after I got off the phone with him. And I remember just sitting there staring at this photo on my phone, and just like looking at it and thinking, man, this is incredible. I've got a tag, and I know that this buck is in my unit, and I generally have an idea of where he's at. I remember telling my wife, like, this fall's probably going to be a little bit rough, because I'm going to move in with this buck. Like, I'm
see you later.
Yeah, I'm moving in. And she was like kind of laughing, and I was like, I just need to understand like the breadth of this opportunity, because I'll just never get to hunt a buck like this again,
Yeah. I'm also doing the math after you said your children's age. This was 2013, you say?
I want to say 13. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had like a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Yeah. Young kids for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think I only had two at the time.
Yeah. Well, good on your wife for letting you go, if that's the way the story that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I went out and I started scouting, trying to find this buck again, and could never turn him up. So never got a look at him. And then my buddy, I had told him about a water hole that was kind of down further in the canyon, and I'd killed a bull off of it a few years prior. And I shot this bull. He came in one evening. It was funny because he came in 2 different evenings, but the first evening he came out and I was kind of posted up on this wallow because there just wasn't a lot of bugling, not a lot of rut, and it was early in the hunt. And he came out and he like stuck his head just like out of this regenerated aspen, just, dog hair thick. He had his eye guards kind of sticking out. And I remember just looking at his face and I could see his eye guards sticking out. And then he just thought, something's not right. So he turned and walked out. And I thought, well, the next day I'll just give the morning, see how it goes. And if nothing transpires, like I'll set that wallow again that night. So the next night, set the wallow, same bull comes in, does the exact same thing, comes down the same trail, sticks his head out. He's kind of looking around, testing the wind and stuff. And then for whatever reason that night, he just trots right out in the middle of this little opening. And he goes out, just plops down into this wallow and he's wallowing, throwing mud all over everywhere. And, I anchored in, drew back, anchored in, and ended up shooting him just as he got up and turned, kind of quartering away from me. It was like 41 yards. And I went and I killed this bull. Great bull. He's like 330, nice bull.
That's a great bull. Yeah.
Yeah, great bull. Anyway, so I told my buddy about this water hole, this wallow that was further down the canyon. And it just happened to be kind of the same drainage where he'd seen this buck. And so he gets a hold of me in August and he calls me up and he's like, hey, I went in and I checked that trail camera. And he's like, I've got probably 4 or 5 pictures of this buck. And he's like, you're not going to believe this buck. He's like, this buck has blown up. He's like, he is so big. And I'll send you some photos so you can look at him. But yeah, I remember looking at the one photo that he sent me and I was just like, I'm just shocked. Like I was so excited.
I could see that you still could feel it. Like you can still feel when you got
away.
that first photo. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, blown away. And so I know he's in that general neighborhood. And so archery opener comes and I'm all excited. I backpack in there. I've been backpacking water up into this area because there's not a ton of water. There's some if you walk all the way over to this, the spring that I told you about. But other than that, not a ton of water. And so I'd been backpacking water in through the summer when I'd been scouting. And I think I've got 5 days planned to be up in there and backpack hunt. And I climb up onto this overlook that I've picked out, via maps. And I'm sitting there. It's just like gray light. It's getting light. And I'm glassing this big face. And I start to pick up some deer. And I think the first buck I saw was a little 3-point. And then there was a 2-point. And then 2 other bucks. And they come walking out. And the second buck is the buck, like the buck,
Yeah.
And
Did you name him, or are you one of those guys that doesn't name?
I named him. I named him Tiger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is kind of it's kind of a funny story, but that was I want to say it was the same year that Tiger Woods was involved in all that scandal, all the cheating scandal.
Okay.
And this buck this buck had the biggest cheaters I've ever seen in my whole life. And so we were like, who's the biggest cheater? Well, it's Tiger Woods. We called him Tiger. Anyway,
good thing Tiger showed up here and named him Armstrong or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Anyway, kind of a stretch, but we called him Tiger. Anyway, so I'm looking at this buck, and I think just for kicks and giggles, I'm going to look at the other buck that I hadn't, quite taken a look at yet. And I look at the other buck, and believe it or not, like the other buck was probably 10 to 15 inches bigger. So this
no way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'd never seen this buck. We didn't have any photos of him. I think he's a 6x5, and I think he was probably 34 wide and probably like 215. Just a giant buck. So I got this group of 4 bucks, right? So I got this one that I want, the tiger buck, and then this new buck that I'd never even seen before. So it was pretty incredible to see, 2 200-inch bucks on a general season unit. But so that was opening morning, and I watched them go up and over, and they kind of fed through this saddle, went onto the backside. That afternoon, I made a loop around, and where they bedded is just this impossible patch of like mixed timber, conifer and aspen. And I had no idea where they went, but I thought my best play was maybe to just post up in that saddle and hope that they would feed back out. And then that evening, they did come feeding out, but I just didn't have an opportunity. They kind of worked up above me and let it get dark, backed out, got the wind and made sure that I wasn't going to blow them out, and I backed out. And I spent the next 4 days trying to find these 2 bucks, which I did not locate. So for 4 more days, I'm just up there glassing from dark to dark. and I just can't pick them up. Just can't find them. And I got to go back to work. So I go back to work and I work my 4 days. And at this day, like back then, I would leave my house. I'd get my kids all ready for bed, put them in bed, say goodbye to my wife at like 8 or 9 o'clock on a Friday night. And I would drive, and then I would backpack in, the 2.5 hours, and I would go to bed for maybe an hour, hour and a half. And then I would jump up and start glassing again. So there was a lot of days. So, I'm going to fast forward to when this like actually came together.
Okay.
Because not a lot
ballpark. How far are we fast forwarding? 10 days, 20 days?
So I hunted this buck 16 days, and I killed him on the 17th day. And I never saw either one of those bucks again. So for the next rest of that hunt, and it was I had a dedicated hunter tag in Utah, which means if you're a part of this program, you can hunt the archery hunt, the muzzleloader hunt, and the rifle hunt, and you can kill 2 deer in 3 years. You got to do some service hours for the DWR, and it's a little bit higher cost of the permit, but I knew I had, the archery hunt and the muzzleloader hunt. So I hunted really hard during the archery hunt, and it was the rainiest year that I can remember. I mean, it rained on me probably, 12 of 16 days, like most of the day. It just absolutely poured rain. I remember after it all came together, which I'll get to, but I remember talking to a kid from, Panguitch. It's a local town. And he's like, yeah, I ran up on the mountain one of those days. And he's like, I drove past your truck that was sitting there at the trailhead. And he's like, I just remember thinking that guy is either one, he's insane, or he's got a buck that he is trying to hunt, because it's been raining for 3 days straight and his truck hasn't moved. He's like, I just couldn't believe that you were staying in it up there. But I was just so wound up with this buck. Like I just wanted it so bad. And, so fast forward, archery hunt comes and goes, and I never see either one of those bucks again. I just can't turn them up. Again, the weather's been kind of rough, but opening day of the muzzleloader hunt comes, and I decide I'm going to backpack in there the night before. So I got in the night before the opener of the muzzleloader hunt. I get up in there and I glass all evening. I don't see anything. And that night, storm kind of comes blowing in, and it's like whipping wind. I mean, like a real rager. And I remember I'd already kind of made my little camp that was kind of on the side of this hill, and I'd kicked out a deer bed, and I was bivvy camping. So I had my bivvy sack kind of kicked in this deer bed underneath this big giant dead Doug fir. And I remember laying there looking up at this Doug fir, just like watching it rock back and forth, with the wind. And one of those
just
big
widowmakers.
Widowmakers.
Yeah. Ugh. That's awful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I never really used to give it a ton of thought. In fact, it's funny. That's like one of my fears, I guess, that's crept in later in my hunting career than it did early. Like early on, I just, whatever, it'll be okay. The chances of some tree coming down on me in the night is slim to none. But the older I've gotten, that's actually one where I'm a lot more particular, like picking my camping spots. But
interesting. Have you ever had a widowmaker close call?
Mm-hmm. I have.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk about that. Let's put a pin in that one.
Yeah.
I'll say that this season, I'd never heard a widowmaker fall in the woods until this season, and it felt like there was one every hour. Like it was just like wherever. I don't know if it was the forest that I was in or the weather, but it's just all day, every day, all season. It's just cracks, just giant cracks and trees falling. It's like new fear unlocked for me. So I don't know if I want to hear your story, but we're gonna do it anyways. But continue.
Yeah. So I'm laying there all night, kind of edgy, because I'm looking up at this big Doug fir and it's blowing around in the wind. I didn't sleep very good. Wind is just absolutely raging. It's kind of spitting rain sideways, blowing in from the south. And I get up in the morning and I think I'm going to run up to my glassing point and just do my thing and glass. And so I get up there in the morning and I glass all morning and just nothing. And it's just raining sideways and the wind is howling. And I think, like midday, I'm going to hike back down to my little bivvy spot. I'm going to like break out some food and eat some food and just take a break and just kind of recoup and reevaluate. And I remember sitting there, I was sitting on this log and I was just looking at the landscape and trying to interpret, where this deer might be. Because I don't think he's left. I've hunted enough deer to know that it feels like the older those bucks get, the more mature they are. It feels like their home range, at least to me, it gets tighter. right? So I don't necessarily think they move unless they get completely bumped out of the area. I think they just learn how to use a tighter area more efficiently. I don't know if that's just like they're more nocturnal, or they bump over just into a little slot canyon or a little side, nook. But I'm thinking to myself, I know this buck is here. I know those bucks are here somewhere. And I'm just kind of evaluating it. And I think to myself, if I was a buck, I've probably been bedded for, the better part of 24 hours because this wind is absolutely raging. And I know that deer and elk, they hate the wind. And I thought, they've probably been bedded quite a bit. I would think tonight, if they are going to get up to feed, they'll probably get up earlier than they might. And wherever it is they're going to get up and feed, they got to find like some little spot that's out of the wind, And so I start looking at it, and there's two different canyons that come together, and there's this little knoll that kind of sits down between the two of them. And I think, well, I'm going to hike down onto that knoll this evening, and I'm going to glass the bottoms of these two canyons. And you can't see a whole lot, but you can see enough that I thought maybe I'll see one of those bucks pop out in the bottom end of a canyon, right?
Yeah. What's the elevation from the top of your knoll to the bottom of one of the canyons, or both of them?
800 foot, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So substantial. All right.
Substantial, but not super deep. Yeah. So I'm sitting there on this knoll, and I've been sitting there for about an hour. It's probably 5:30, and I'm glassing down the canyon, and I kind of scanned everything I thought, and I'd probably been sitting there for, I don't know, maybe an hour, I guess. And I turn and I look back up the canyon. I'm looking up the canyon, and as I'm glassing into the bottom, I see this buck walk through this little opening, and he's a little 3-point. And then I'm like, okay, cool. There's at least a deer. And I had one 5-day stretch during this hunt where I saw a 2-point and a doe. That was it. Like total.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
That's defeating morally. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. And that's glassing all day. And so I'm like, cool, at least I see a buck. So I grab my spotting scope and I throw my spotting scope up, and I'm get it on that buck, and I'm watching him, and I see another deer kind of coming through the trees, and I look at it, and it's a doe. And I was like, oh, that's kind of strange. And I'm kind of looking at the two of them, just scanning a little bit, and I scan back down below them maybe 100 yards, and I can see another deer, and it's kind of working its way through the trees, and he breaks out into the open. As soon as he breaks out into the open, I was just like, I can't believe it. That's him. Like, that's the big cheater buck, that's Tiger. And I just was like, I don't know when I'm going to, possibly ever see this deer again. Like, I've been hunting 16 days and I've only seen him, the one time, which was opening day. And so it probably took me like less than a minute to make a decision that I was just going to go. Like, I'm just going to run at him. Yep. So I threw everything in my backpack, took off running, and I dropped into the bottom, and I had to go up the bottom, and I had to pop up and over this other little knoll. And they were kind of headed towards that opening, which is that wallow, that little water area where I killed that bull elk. And I kind of know where it's at. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe they're going to pop up into that little wet meadow, probably for feed. Maybe they're going to end up watering. And so I'm aiming for that, hoping that I can like intersect him. And so I come up over this little knoll, and as I pop up over the top, I'm just like creeping through real slow. I drop my backpack, and I'm creeping through with my muzzleloader, and I'm looking down through this like it's kind of a matrix of aspen and some burn stuff, and I'm kind of looking down through, and all of a sudden I see the 3-point, and he's at the top end of the meadow, like he's already moved through it. And I'm like, okay, cool. I know that buck was first. And then I look, and here's the doe to the right of it. And then I see Tiger, the big buck, and he's kind of in the mix too. And they're all like out the top end of the meadow. Like they've moved through it already. Like I'm 5 minutes late. Oh. And I am beside myself. And I'm trying to reevaluate, like, what do I do now? So I'm just sitting there because I'm like, I'm going to have to go back and get my backpack because I dropped it about 100 yards back. And I'm trying to think, if I keep the wind in my favor, can I circle up around them? And if I do, it's probably going to be a jump shoot situation where they're going to see me and I'm going to see them. And I'm hopefully just going to be able to, get a crack at like 30 yards. And I'm trying to make that decision, and I'm looking at the landscape, trying to figure out how to make that move. And I just was like kind of starting to turn my back, and I see the 3-point, and he's turned around like full 180, and he's coming back into the meadow, and he's like working right down the middle of the meadow. And I'm watching him, and I was like, why on earth, what are they doing, you know? And so then I'm like, okay, maybe that bigger buck's going to follow. So I creep up like maybe another 10 yards. There's this big burned out mahogany. It's got a perfect little notch in it for a rest. I just lay my muzzleloader in it, and I'm just like watching this 3-point come down through. And then sure enough, here comes the doe. She's following. And then here comes Tiger. And he's just walking on a stiff walk right down through the meadow. And he gets out to where I'm literally looking right into the wallow. He's standing pretty much right in front of this wallow where I'd shot a bull elk out of with an arrow like 2 years prior. And he's standing there. I'd ranged it. It was 81 yards. And I was shooting 1 power scope, and I just put the crosshairs on him and shot. And it was just that classic, like hit hard, just folded, like legs came out from underneath him, and he just hit the ground. And
Wow.
I pulled up my binos to look at him, and he's just laying there expired, and he's dead right there in that meadow in front of me. And I was so excited. I ran back and I got my backpack, and I took off because I just wanted to go down there and see him and be near him. And I'm like running down the hill, and I get down there, and I get down to the buck and just get a chance to like look at him and admire him. And that's probably one of the first animals I ever remember walking up to where just the sheer magnitude of like how big this buck was just like overwhelming. Like I couldn't believe how big this deer was. And it was just
That's amazing.
giant body.
I was
Anyway,
worried for a second, Charles, that you were going to go grab your back, come back, and he just wasn't there. Like you just like stunned him, and he got back up and had moved 50 yards or whatever. He had me worried.
Nope. I'd hit him right behind the shoulder, and it just, for whatever reason, the shock of that muzzleloader, I guess, at that close distance just had pounded him. But yeah, he went right down. It was funny though, because I finally kind of got my wits about me, and I was trying to get my stuff together, and I had left my backpack open for some reason, probably because I'd grabbed like extra supplies to reload my muzzleloader. But I had scattered all of my gear completely across that hillside from where I'd shot him to where the dead buck was.
Yeah.
I was so excited in the moment that I dropped my spotting scope. I dropped all kinds of clothing, camping equipment. Like I just scattered that whole hillside, and you'd think you would have heard that, in the approach, but I was just like so one-minded and so focused and just so excited on that buck that, I just lost it. But I had to go back up and pick up all my stuff, and then ended up calling my buddy, and I got a hold of him. Ended up gutting the buck that night, and then he hiked in the next morning, came up and helped me take some photos, which was really cool because then we both got to pack it out together, and he got to be a part of it because in reality, that was probably as much his buck as it was mine. Just for the heads up that he'd given me. But yeah, I just to work so hard for something and want something so bad, and then all the ups and downs and just all the mental grind of those 16 days leading up to that point to then have it work out was just overwhelming. It was like one of my very favorite moments. Like I'll never forget walking up on that buck.
All that effort, all that put in, and then at the very end, just a little bit of luck where they turned back around and came back at you.
Right.
That's awesome. I bet that felt so good.
Yeah.
When they turned, in the part of the story when you said they turned around, I was like, "What for?" Like,
right.
That doesn't make any sense. Like,
I know.
Maybe there's a hunter on the other side, or who knows? But dude, congrats. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, you got to think 9 times out of 10 they just walk through that meadow and they walk into this just sea of timber, and that's it.
Yep. 99 out of 100. I bet they just keep moving through.
Yeah, you just don't get a crack at him. But for whatever reason that night, they just flipped around and came right back through the exact spot that I needed him to, which was just crazy. Yeah,
that's
crazy.
Awesome. Here's a question I have for you.
Mm-hmm.
I know in like Colorado, you can always kind of go down a weapon, right? So if you have a muzzleloader tag, you can technically archery hunt. Can you do that in Utah with the tag that you had, or were you required to hunt with a muzzleloader?
So like if you have a rifle tag in Utah, you could still hunt with a bow if you want to, as long as you wear orange. And and I just don't know about a muzzleloader hunt specific. I actually should know that, but I know that during the any weapon season. You can hunt with a bow, a rifle, a muzzleloader if you want. But during muzzleloader, I think it's a muzzleloader only season.
Okay. Interesting. And now we got to go back, take that pin back, and talk about your close call with your, what are they called? Widowmaker. Because
Widowmaker.
Like I said, I probably don't want to hear this story because it's probably going to terrify me, but I still want to hear it.
Yeah, I had a late season archery elk tag in Arizona, and it was the first year I'd ever done that late hunt. I've done it 4 times now, 2 different units, but the first year I ever drew the tag and went down and did it. Same kind of deal. It was a morning hunt where I'd seen some bulls down into a canyon, and I had maybe 2 days worth of gear on my back, food, shelter, and I just thought, I'm going to bomb off in there and try to get close to them this afternoon and hopefully make something happen. And if not, maybe I can pick them up first thing in the morning. And so went down in there after these bulls. It didn't come together, couldn't find them. And then, evening came and it got dark, and same thing. I had a storm blowing in the afternoon and the wind was just whipping really bad. So I picked a spot, threw my bivvy out underneath it and climbed in it. And the wind just progressively got harder and harder. And it was hard enough to sleep as it was, but I was in kind of a burn area.
Yeah.
And I was laying there. It was probably 3:15 in the morning. This giant, big Doug fir again. It shook the ground. It came down probably within 30 feet of me, I guess, which isn't technically all that close, but it's close enough to scare the hell out of you. But it came down. I mean, I remember it shook the ground, woke me up. It was so loud, and came to, kind of looked around, figured out what had happened, and it scared me bad enough that 3:15 in the morning, I threw everything in my backpack and hiked to the top of the ridge onto a little clearing and opening that I thought was big enough that there wouldn't be any other trees that would come down.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I did that in the middle of the night and made that move. And then again, this is just like a random thing. I got up the next morning and it was still just absolutely whipping. And I hiked off over into the little edge of this canyon, and I sat down. I looked down into the canyon thinking that if there's any animals, they're going to be down the bottom out of the wind, and ended up glassing this 6-point bull that was right down the head of this canyon, and ended up just diving in after him and made a loop. And I ended up killing him that morning, like mid morning.
There you go.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like over the years, I've thought about it. So like this buck that I killed, I just told the story about. I don't know if that buck was, because he came out right where, I killed him right where we got trail camera photos of him, right? So he hadn't left. He was there still in the area. It's not like he just disappeared. I've often wondered like if he was just really nocturnal, like not getting up until, it was after dark, or, being back in bed, or if he was just using the landscape. But as I've thought about it over the years, I actually don't know if I would have ever killed that deer or seen that deer if it wouldn't have been on the backside of that storm. I think that there's probably something to the theory of those deer or that elk being bedded for a really long time because all the wind and the rain. And then, eventually when it kind of broke, they got up to feed because they'd been bedded for so long.
Gotcha.
So
no, that adds up. I don't know enough about hunting to say, yeah, for sure. But that, just common sense makes a lot of sense. And it worked out just fine for you, huh?
Yeah. Kind of a working theory that I have. I think on the backside of a storm, especially if it's been, prolonged, I think it's probably a pretty good time to maybe catch an animal out and about that you might not otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. And 30 feet is definitely plenty close for a widowmaker. Plenty close for a widowmaker. I don't think I've been within 100 yards, but they are terrifying when you're anywhere nearby and you hear them crack. Did the cracking of the wood wake you up, or was it the shaking of it hitting the ground that woke you up?
Shaking of the ground. Yeah. Like I must have finally got to like a good sleep, and man, when it hit the ground, it was just loud. Like I felt it through the ground. Yeah. Well, it brought me wide awake. Since then I try to be a lot more particular about the places that I camp. So like if I'm in a burned area, I always try to put myself between 2 big, downfall logs that are at least big enough that I can get down to a depth that if something else did fall over it, that I would like have some space between me and it.
Okay. That makes sense.
I try to be much more particular because I hunt a lot of burn areas, and it's not like you can avoid camping in them. So I just have to be a little bit smarter in picking a spot.
Yeah. Wow, that's good advice. I'm sure plenty of people have had some pretty terrifying experiences with widowmakers. I mean, they have a name for a reason.
Yeah.
But let's keep going, Joe. What else you got? I know you got plenty of stories. What other ones do you want to share with us today, since I know we got limited time here?
Yeah, another hunting story. So I had some in mind, but I was thinking about it last night before I went to bed, and I thought it might be kind of fun to. I don't know if it'd be fun for people. Hopefully, it'd be fun for listeners, but I thought it'd be fun for me just to kind of relive my kickoff as far as like my love of elk hunting, and then really my love of archery hunting. So,
Perfect.
yeah. So it had to have been about 2001. I took a job with the Forest Service. So I was working this ATV trail crew, and basically I'd go out every day, and I had these certain trails that I would go out and I would clear, packed a chainsaw, which was a really fun job to have because I just rode every day and cleared trail. And they have these counters and cameras that they put out to like track the usage on this ATV trail system in southern Utah. And so I was doing that every day, and I was outdoors all the time and just loved it. And I had a coworker, and his name was Jason Anderson. And I don't know, along the way at some point, he said, "Hey, have you ever got into bow hunting?" And kind of planted a seed. I mean, the seed was kind of already there because my dad, when I was a kid, he bow hunted always.
Mhm.
He would take like 10 days every fall, and he would go out on his own and he would bow hunt. It was kind of like his little disconnect. I mean, I'm the youngest of five, so I'm sure it was a much needed reprieve from home life, just to get out and not have to deal with five kids. So he kind of planted this seed, my buddy, and then my dad, like I said, he'd bow hunted, and so I started kind of picking my dad's, brain and saying, "Hey, I'm kind of considering getting into bow hunting." And he said, "Well, I've got an old bow in the basement if you want to like get it set up and kind of start shooting a little bit and see how you like it." And
You two roughly the same size?
no, I mean, he's quite a bit, yeah, he's quite a bit shorter than me. And at the time, like, I didn't know anything about draw length or weight or anything. And I remember going down into our basement. We had kind of an overflow storage room, and he digs out this bow, and it's an old Fred Bear compound. I mean, this thing, I don't know the year on it. I wish I still had it. I should ask him if he still has it, but
That was my next question. I ask everybody when they're telling their first archery story, do you still have that bow? You'd be surprised how many people do.
yeah, I would bet that he does. I should see if I can find it. But yes, we pulled it out. It needed some work, just kind of a refurb. And so we kind of tinkered with it and got it set up and pulled it back a few times to make sure it was going to hold together. Had a sight on it. So it was the original sight that he used. It had the brass pins, the old brass pins that have like the knob at the end. And he'd taken, if I remember, he'd taken some white out and kind of put white out on the end of those little knobs at the end of those pins for a
That's
reference
smart.
point. And didn't have a D loop or anything on it. No release. It had like an old rest on it, just like a fork rest. And so I think I took it to a local archery shop, and I'm sure this happens to archery shops all the time. They have somebody that just walks in with an old bow, and they probably roll their eyes like, "Oh man." Yeah, I took it in, and we got a D-loop put on it. I bought a release. I think I put a whisker biscuit, I want to say, on it at the time, and got it set up, and I just started shooting it. And I had his old aluminum arrows. I think I had 5 or 6 mismatched broadheads that were like fixed blade, probably Thunderheads or Zwickeys at the time.
Okay.
And the only permit that I could get at the time was an over-the-counter archery spike tag. So in Utah, they still have this unlimited over-the-counter archery spike, and you can kill either a spike or a cow. And so I bought the permit and practiced all summer. We went out and we'd hunted for a few days. We called in some bulls. It was like, I remember that year was like an early rut, and my dad was calling for me. And I remember one day we called in 2 different bulls. And just like that interaction was awesome. I was loving that. Both of them branch antlered, so not legal bulls. And then I want to say it was probably 5-6 days into hunting. We were working down this drainage, and we looked up and we saw this lone spike that was kind of on this hillside all by himself. So we slipped him underneath him. We got the wind in our favor, and my dad kind of tucked back in behind some trees, and I set up in front of this big juniper tree. And he started cow calling. My dad's always been a really good elk caller.
Okay.
Diaphragm.
Self-taught, or how do you figure it out?
Yeah, self-taught.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And I
It's
mean,
like
he's
nowadays we got YouTube and all sorts of millions of
for sure.
options, but like back then, I was always curious how people learned to call.
Yep, self-taught, and way better. Even now with all the experience that I've had over the years and the elk that I've killed, like he's still a much better caller with a diaphragm call than I'll ever be. I'm sure he.
Yeah. What did he
Yeah,
use back then? Like, did he have a diaphragm call from somebody, or how did he figure that out?
yeah, diaphragm call. I don't even remember the brand. It might have been like a. I can't even remember the brand. It wouldn't have had like the dome in it. You know what I mean? Like the modern ones do. It would have just been like a flat reed diaphragm call. I don't remember him bugling, but his cow calls are just sweet. Like he can really hit a cow call. So he sits back and he starts cow calling, a few times. And I think I remember looking back into the trees because he had a better vantage point up onto the hill. And I think he motioned to me, hey, he's coming, get ready. So I got set up in front of this tree and he's walking in and I can hear him coming in and I see him eventually and just like my heart's pounding, this is like gonna happen. And he walks to the right side or to the left side of this big juniper tree that's kind of out in front of me. And it looks to me like he's gonna come out right to my right. And so I'm all ready to go. And he kind of hangs up behind the tree, but I'm just sitting there looking at him and I can see like his belly, I can see his feet, through the bottom of that juniper tree. And I'm just looking at him. So I range his feet and he's like 23 yards and I'm waiting for him to come out. And he eventually like pulls a reverse card and turns and he walks back the other way. And then he comes back to my left and he walks out to my left and he walks out, totally broadside. And I remember kind of waiting for him. I remember my dad had, talked to me saying, hey, you really got to be patient, especially when they get within range, wait for him to turn his head or walk behind a tree so you can get the full draw. So I think I waited for him to turn his head and he kind of turned his head back uphill looking the other way. And I drew my bow and I anchored in and it was like one of those classic, you hear archers or bow hunters talk, like a classic blackout. Like I don't even really remember much,
Okay. Yeah.
Like I'm sure I got the pins somewhere close to, but I got the full draw and tried to aim at him and I, touched it off. And at the moment I was like, yeah, I just, I aced him. Like I thought
game
for sure
over.
game over. Yeah. I thought I'd made a perfect shot. It was 23 yards, like I said. And so he runs, takes off kind of back up the hill and I'm all excited. I was on my knees at the time. So I get to my feet and I walk back to my dad. I tell him the whole situation and what happened. And I'm like, yeah, I just shot this spike and I'm 100% sure that I, put it right behind his shoulder and everything's awesome. He's like, giving me the fatherly pep talk, like, well, let's just be patient. Let's give him some time and, take a deep breath. And so we waited for probably 15, 20 minutes. Then we walked over to kind of the, point of impact to look for my arrow. And I'm walking around. I'm so excited. Like I don't even know. Like if there had been blood there, I probably wouldn't have seen it because I was just so amped up, right?
Yeah.
I'm looking, 100 yards up the hill constantly, just like looking for a dead spike to be laying there. But eventually he finds my arrow and he picks it up and it's a complete miss. Like just, no contact whatsoever, no blood, no hair, no nothing. And I remember him saying, hey, I've got your arrow. It looks like you missed. And like I was devastated. I was so just, I was upset. So upset with myself. I remember, I've got 3 boys. I've mentioned that before, but like I just remember how, like tenderly, like he was, even though I was like a young man, I was 21 at the time, but I just remember him being like, hey, it's okay. This stuff happens, and just how kind, I guess, he was to me in that moment. He wasn't frustrated and mad and just was so supportive. That experience like really lit a fire in me for bow hunting, especially for archery elk hunting. So fast forward, I didn't end up getting an elk that year. We get into the spring and we're looking at applications. And I told my dad after that experience, I said, hey, I really want to get into, a new bow because this is something that I really enjoy. Like I enjoy shooting a bow. The hunting aspect of it, I absolutely loved. over Christmas, my mom and dad went in halvesies with me and ended up getting me a new bow, which was a Matthews Q2. And single
awesome.
solo cam back in the day. We got a fiber optic sight. It had 5 pins. I remember it was a trophy ridge. It had the vertical 5 pins, and I remember that whole process of sighting it in and getting it all set up. And I just shot constantly. Like, I fell in love with archery. And so that year it comes application season. And at the time in Utah, they had this hunt called the AR 301, which bow hunters could apply for this. And if you drew it, you could hunt one of, I want to say it was like 3 different units. You could actually hunt any of those 3 different units in southern Utah. And at the time, there was no like waiting period for that. The draw odds for that hunt at the time were like 1 in 4. So you had like a 25% chance to draw, which is really good back in the day. And so that we decided we were going to apply for that because 3 of the units were basically surrounding where I grew up. And so we were real familiar with all those different units. And so we applied and I drew the permit. And, from that point on, all I did was practice. I just practiced constantly to get ready. And the hunt comes in September. I just got married that year, actually. Brand new married, hit September. We got married in June. I told my wife, I said, hey, I have this elk tag in September. And I think she was like, oh yeah, my family hunted. I'm kind of familiar with hunting, but I was like, I don't know that you understand like what a fire this is lit inside me. Like, I have to do this thing.
Yeah. Foreshadowing to your first story where you're like, I'm gone this month.
Yeah. No kidding. Yeah. I set a real precedence, I would say, in that first year for sure of what hunting meant to me. And, so we went out, we started hunting. We started early in September and we just hunted hard every day. I mean, my parents lived pretty close to the unit. I was going to college in southern Utah, so I would drive home and I would hunt for as many days as I could, and I would drive back to try to catch up on classwork so I didn't get too far behind. But we were getting up every day, driving up into the woods and just hiking and hunting. We weren't doing any backpacking or staying out in the woods at the time. I mean, we were up early, 2:30, 3 in the morning every day.
Yeah.
We were getting home late, like 10:30, 11, and sleeping for probably 3 or 4 hours and then up and at it again. And we just did that day after day. At the end of this hunt, I want to say that my dad had told me he lost like 16 pounds. And
wow.
during this hunt, like, we really poured it on. We put boot leather down that year. And, it was almost a complete opposite from the year prior in regard to the rut, because we just did not have any rut. In the year prior, it felt like the bulls were just rutting real hard and they were rutting early. And it was a little bit depressing in the fact that we just couldn't get anything going. We couldn't get a bull worked up. We were seeing a few bulls here and there just glassing, but we just couldn't get a bull fired up. And we fast forward, we get to I think we're like day 14 at this point that I've hunted, with my dad, and got up real early, hit this ridge. We hiked this ridge all the way back up into this big drainage, and sat down in the morning. And I remember that morning we did hear one bugle, and I remember thinking, oh, that's a good sign. We finally heard one, but it was just one, and it was a long ways off, and it was prior to it getting light. And I start glassing across the canyon, and I see a group of elk, and there's probably, 15, 20 cows, and there's a herd bull, and then there's kind of a satellite bull, and they're not really rutting, they're not really talking, they're just kind of feeding. And they're all the way across the drainage from us, but they're working uphill, as elk tend to do. Of a morning, they're moving uphill. And we're kind of on a parallel with them, but it looks like they're going to move up onto this big bench that sits below this big peak. And, my dad tells me, he said, I think we should just try to cut the distance. Let's just gain elevation and let's just work up onto that bench. And hopefully we can, get something going, whether it's a calling sequence or if we can just sneak up on one. So we take off and we're headed up the ridge, and we're hiking and sweating. I just remember being so hot because it was really hot September. and we're working hard, and we get all the way up on top of this bench, and we kind of take a break, 5 minutes probably, to catch our breath. And we start kind of just, my dad's like, hey, let's just start sneaking through this little flat. And it's an old burn scar, and it's just mostly like dog hair aspen, just thick regenerated aspen. And we're kind of fighting through it, and every now and then we kind of break out into an opening or a clearing. And as we break out into those clearings, my dad's telling me, hey, let's really slow down as we see those coming up, and just like evaluate, take a good look into those to see if there's any elk in them before we move through. So I think we'd probably move through a couple of those, and we're just creeping along, and step out into this one, and it's a decent sized opening. And just kind of corner of my eye, I catch some movement, and I look and I see this bull, and he's just feeding out into this clearing. And I see him, and he's a great 6-point, like a really solid bull. It was the herd bull of the group. And there was a ground juniper, I remember, kind of a few feet out into the meadow, and my dad says, hey, let's just real slowly crawl up to that ground juniper, and we'll kind of use that for cover, stay behind it, get set up, and hopefully that bull kind of feeds out into the meadow towards us. And so that's what we did, crawled out and behind this juniper, and we're just kind of sitting there, and my heart's thumping, and we're watching this bull. And it was like the bull, read the textbook. He did exactly what we needed him to do. He walked kind of angling out towards us, and then turned completely broadside. And I remember his front leg going forward, kind of opening up that whole pocket. And I remember my dad, he was off my right shoulder, or my left shoulder. And I remember him saying, there's your shot. And like, he, actually, after this whole entire hunt, concluded, my dad's always loved to write, and he took the time to sit down and write out from his experience this entire hunt. And I remember, yeah, which is really cool. And it's he put pictures with it and everything, and that's like one thing I cherish, and I've still got it every now and then. If I need a little pick me up, I'll go ahead and read that. But uh, yeah, that's a good idea. Actually, I should do that. It's probably 5-6 pages, I would say, if I remember correctly. Yeah, yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, really. Yeah, he's always done that. He's always been a prolific writer. In fact, I just saw him over the holidays, and he'd taken the time to sit down and write kind of a memory or a story for all my siblings. Like he'd done that for Christmas for us, which was really, it was cool. He's always been a prolific writer, and he writes really well, which is fun. I always enjoy people that write like they talk, like they speak, if that makes any difference. Or, but that's how my dad writes. He writes like he talks, which is great. I love it. So I can hear his voice. Yep. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. He used to do that. I remember, when I was in high school, I played baseball, and we played for a state championship game. And I remember the night before the game, he just slipped an envelope, and he'd written me, handwritten letter. It was probably 3 pages, and it was just all of his thoughts on competition and winning and mindset, and kind of his memories from me playing Little League. And it was just cool. But he's always done that, and it's something I try to. It's changed a little bit for me. A lot more of those types of notes are in text message to my kids, which probably don't mean as much, but it's something I try to write to my kids quite a bit too. But it was cool that he did that. But yeah, so this bull, he steps out. My dad, I vividly remember him saying, there's your shot. Came to full draw, anchored in, and shot broke, and just absolutely pounded him right behind the shoulder. And he kind of lurched forward, and I remember him walking into this sea of aspen, and then I remember hearing that that thud of him going over. And I just couldn't believe it had happened. I was so excited, and I remember walking up on that bull. I still have some pictures. I'll have to send you one. But yeah, we yes, I killed this bull. I remember giving it the proper time to like fully expire, even though we'd heard it go down. I remember the whole blood trail and kind of tracking out and finding it. At the time, this was like really prior to people quartering animals out, right? Like the gutless method, Yeah. And so at the time, my dad was like, well, yeah, we need to gut it. And that was the first elk I'd ever gutted. And I remember that just being an impossible task. It felt like,
Yeah.
They're so big. And I remember one point, this is kind of a funny side story, but at one point I finally got it gutted and we were skinning out a hindquarter to start to pull that off. And we were kind of working there close together. And I remember my dad ran his knife somehow across the back of my knuckle.
Oh.
And at this point in the day, it was probably close to noon. And I remember I stood up and I looked at it, and just that telltale feeling of like, oh, I'm going to go out, like I'm going to pass out. And
really?
Yeah. Yeah. And the cloud just sucked in and went completely black, and I passed out. And I woke up. My dad had grabbed me and pulled me up against a tree, and he was just kind of sitting behind me, like holding me around the chest, like talking to me, trying to get me to come to. And
oh my gosh.
I mean, obviously completely terrified.
Yeah.
At the time, being the person that passed out, I didn't think a whole lot of it. But now, myself, having been a father for a bunch of years, I can imagine how completely terrifying that would have been for him, because he probably had no idea what had even happened.
Yeah.
He probably didn't know if he cut me or if I'd cut myself or what. And there's so much blood, when you're taking care of an animal anyway. It's like you don't know if it's yours or the elk's or what. But yeah, I can imagine how completely terrified he must have been. And as I came to, I remember, like, oh, he looks, pretty scared.
Yeah.
And at that time, like, I came back to, and I remember him saying, I've done some thinking, and like we haven't eaten anything all day. Like all we've done has just been straight hiking. We got up at 3 a.m. and hiked all day. Now we've been taking care of an elk. And so we broke out the snack bag, and I remember we ate some Snickers bars and some chips and whatever else we'd packed, but we sat there and ate for a while. And then finally, kind of came to and was able to get the elk completely taken care of. We weren't going to be able to like pack it out that night, the two of us. And I remember actually on the way out in the dark that night when we went out, finally, I remember we got lost in the middle of the night. This was back before the day of, GPS units or phones that you could drop a pin. And I'd just been navigating that landscape with my dad just based off sight and memory. And it's funny, like, today I'm much worse at that than I was back then. It used to be that I would remember like vividly what a rock looked like or a tree looked like. And I remember mentally I'm making a note as I'm working a landscape because I need to find my way back. And I remember being much more aware of that and taking like mental notes of like, that's what that ridge looks like. That's what that rock looks like. That's what that tree looks like, And I've gotten a lot worse at that now that my phone my phone's made me lazy, right?
Yep, those mapping softwares, man, they're pretty amazing. They're pretty amazing. I had I don't know if you know who Donnie Dust is. He's like a survivalist, long gray hair, based out of Colorado. He's been on Alone and a bunch of other things. But he had this. He tells all these stories about hunting without any GPS. He's never used it. He takes his girlfriend, now wife, out. And he was like, okay, we'll use this. And he's like, this is pretty nice. Because he had never used it up until like a few years ago. He had never used it because that's just the way he does it. He builds his own bows. He makes his own arrows. He does all that stuff. But he was like, man, I get used to this software. Like that's the one thing out of all the modern stuff that he's like, wow. Yeah. So it's changing who we are.
I think it's the biggest change probably in hunting in my lifetime, as far as just an advantage to navigate a landscape and then using aerial imagery to like pick out meadows and travel routes. I think it's the biggest advancement probably in my life. But
or for tracking, blood tracking, animal tracking.
For sure.
They get that range finder. I shot a cow moose 2 years ago, and I shot her, and I saw her make this big loop, but it was last light, and I saw her, I thought she laid down, and there's a big tree right at the other end. So I just started scanning until all of a sudden my rangefinder jumped, went to my OnX, and I was like, okay, I'm going to put a pin, 85 yards that way, which is where that jump went. And my pin was right on top of her. Like, it's just, we had to back out because a huge storm rolled in. But, man, she was laying exactly where I thought she was because of the mapping software on my phone. So, it's crazy.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, I remember going in on that morning, I was counting creek crossings as we were going because they had a bunch of different creeks that we had to cross. And I remember counting them, trying to count them coming back, and then just getting, confused of where I was at. I remember at one point we just sat down on the ground, and it was, pitch dark, and we got the headlamps, and we're just trying to figure out exactly how we're going to get back to the truck. And I remember at one point it felt like, kind of a light, and I assume it was probably the moon starting to peek up over the top, and then it finally came up and illuminated enough of the horizon that I could kind of make out where I thought we were. And I told my dad, I know where I'm at now. We just need to go to the top of this ridge and then, bomb down to the truck, which we did and made it out. But yeah, it was just a complete adventure. One little funny story, and then I'll wrap up with this one, but it's one of my favorite memories, actually. Some point during this hunt, we had worked this bull, up into this little drainage, and I can't remember if we'd heard him bugle once or if we'd seen him, but we knew that there was this bull just up this drainage off of this big meadow, and it was kind of mid-morning. So what we decided we were going to do is just post up in this meadow and hope this bull would kind of feed back out in the evening. And we had at the time, we'd bought one of these cow elk decoys, the pop-up, the Montana elk decoys.
Yeah.
And my dad had thought, hey, let's set that elk decoy up at the opposite end of this meadow, and maybe we'll call throughout the afternoon. If that bull kind of works in, he'll see that cow kind of work his way, towards us, and we'll get a shot opportunity. So we set that cow elk decoy up, and then we sat down. It was probably 11 in the morning, and one of my favorite things about elk hunting is like those midday naps. You take a nap, you sleep great. It's like the only time the entire year I actually get a nap. And
same, man. I don't nap at all at home, but man, that like 1 p.m. in the elk woods, I'm like, I'm going to just find a tuft of grass to put my head on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we laid down there. We ate a little lunch, laid down there, and we were just, having a good nap. And I probably slept for an hour, and I woke up and sat up, and I was just kind of looking out across the meadow and, took note of the decoy out there, and kind of back to my left, my dad, I hear him kind of starting to wake up, and he rolls over and he sits up, and he sits up, and immediately he's like, Trail, get down. And I was like, what? And he's like, get down. I was like, okay. So I get down, and I'm not sure what's going on. I was like, what's going on? And he's like, there's an elk. And I was like, an elk? What are you talking about? And he's like, there's an elk right out there in the meadow. He's like, look. So I turn back and I look, and he's kind of pointing at it, and I was like, Dad, that's that decoy. That's our own decoy. But he completely fallen asleep, forgot about our decoy, and then just got so excited at this side of this elk. So they must be pretty good because it fooled my dad. But I like to give him a hard time about that, and that's kind of a fun family story that we like to rehash from time to time.
Yeah. Did he include that in his summary of the hunt when he retold it? He did.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
That's too funny.
Yeah, but I mean that elk hunt, it lit the fire in me. Like, that captivated me completely between those two different hunts with my dad, and I'll be forever grateful for my dad and the opportunity he gave me to kind of learn and progress. And, he took a big chance from moving out from Indiana to the West because he wanted to hunt. And, he raised us in just a real rural community where we were completely feral and free range. And, I'll forever be grateful for that opportunity because it really made me who I am. So anyway,
that's awesome. That's a great story.
Thanks.
I love it. And God, I can't even imagine how terrified your father had to be when you passed out, man. Like, as a father myself, immediately made my heart sink. At first I was like, oh, that's funny, you're going down. And then the thought of just being a dad and having to deal with that. And then, I'm sure at some point it's like, oh, what am I going to tell his mother?
Yeah.
One of those lines. But man, that was a great story, Trail. All of your stories were phenomenal, despite the headaches that I provided you with this, episode here. Let's do this, man. Do you have anything? Actually, you work for GoHunt. I want to tell you one quick GoHunt story. I don't know if you guys still do this, but you used to, and you can tell me if you still do. But you do like a giveaway every month for your for the members. Is that still in place?
Yeah, they still do giveaway. They kind of they've kind of put it into bigger giveaways less frequently, but we have larger giveaways. But they still do that for the members. Yeah, as long as you're an insider, you're entered in to win.
So when I started hunting, GoHunt was like one of the very first things. So I've been a member for 10 years. You guys got a lot of my money, and I've shopped there and done all that stuff. But like within 3 weeks of signing up to like start doing my research, because you guys have all those wonderful articles that you probably wrote half of the ones that I was reading. Within 3 weeks of me diving into that, I won a backpack, like a mystery ranch backpack from you guys. Yeah, and I was like, this has got to be a joke. I was like, what are they doing here? And I was like, I wonder if only new people win this, just so they get them to stick around forever. But I won a $500 backpack from you guys just right off the bat. You guys sent it over, and I've been a happy customer ever since, man. I'm not kidding. I use it every year. I renew every year. I'm constantly reading the articles. I'm checking the draw odds, and you got the point tracker. You got so much stuff in there. It's a great tool. So what you guys are doing is awesome, and I will say it's probably, at this point in my life, my longest standing subscription that I've ever had.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. We appreciate you being a member and giving us a vote of confidence to use the product, and hopefully, I mean, that's the thing about working this job. Like, it's a job for me, right? Like, I look at it as a job. It's a career. Helps me pay my mortgage, my car payments, and that kind of thing. But and I like it. But really, the thing that I love the most about it is when I get an opportunity to hear from somebody or talk to somebody and help them draw a permit and go on a hunt. And I think the older I've gotten, the magnitude of that, it just has hit me, in new ways. It's that much bigger because I just know how much hunting means to me. Like it's my most meaningful moments, a lot of them of my entire life. Some of the biggest lessons I've ever learned in my life have been during hunting seasons and hunts. And I just think it's so cool that I can now help somebody, that maybe never thought they could do something like that, actually figure it out and go out and do it on their own. So man,
it's a great tool.
Yeah, I appreciate you being a member.
And I've loved seeing the progression of it from like when I started, having a couple states. Now it's like feels like the whole country's in there, all the species, everything. So if you guys aren't familiar with GoHunt, check it out. But Trail, do you want to leave the people with how they can find you, or you want to walk off into the sunset, man? Your call.
I'm always happy to help people. So if you got a DM, a burning question, you can hit me up on Instagram, which my handle is just TrailK11. I wouldn't say I'm the most interesting follow because I just don't post that much, to be honest. I don't spend a ton of time on social media, and the time that I do, it's most often just answering people's DMs that have questions and about hunting. So you can find me on Instagram. If you want to follow GoHunt, you can follow GoHunt's YouTube page. We do post quite a bit of content on our YouTube page, and then we also have our own podcast YouTube channel, so you can find that. And then just any hunting platform or any streaming podcast platform, you can find the Big Hunt Guys podcast or my podcast, which is the Game Trail.
Okay. Perfect, man. Well, Trail, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you. Like I said, been a fan. I've been following you for a while, whether it's maybe it's the GoHunt videos that I always watch. Maybe that's how I've been following you. But it's a pleasure to meet you, and I have a feeling we'll have you back on because I know you got plenty more stories to share with us.
Yeah. I always got a hunting story to tell. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and don't worry about any technical issues that you might have had. I know what that's like on the other side of the coin. So don't worry about it. I don't mind at all, and I'm genuinely really appreciative that you kept following up and you took the time to have me on. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you again.
Yep. Have a good one.
All right, guys, That's it. Another couple stories in the books. Again, I want to thank Trail for coming on the podcast. I had a lot of fun. We did have a couple technical difficulties. I had at least 2 power outages during this entire thing. So I want to thank Trail for being patient with me because it was weird. And I had to actually do this over 2 days. But I hope you guys enjoyed the stories. And we'll definitely have him back. He's got too many stories not to come back on and share some more. For you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. Again, like, follow, subscribe, review, all of those things. Check us out on Instagram and YouTube. YouTube is where you'll get the video episodes, ad-free, of course. And then, we're doing the giveaway in a few months. So follow us on those formats in order to get the most information in regards to how to get entered to win a bunch of really cool stuff that I'm still working on collecting. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. Now get out there and make some stories of your own.